love LinkedIn, and everyone at Social Tree loves LinkedIn. A big part of our work is on LinkedIn. And the reason why we love LinkedIn is because, quite honestly, it's the best platform for B2B social media communications. And by extension, it is the best platform to engage with high net worth users and anyone who is a very senior professional. So that being said, I'm really, really pleased to be introducing to Social Media and Finance a regular speaker at the conference because he is so knowledgeable. Benedict Kingsmill, who is Senior Client Partner for Enterprise Divisions in Financial Services Vertical at LinkedIn. Welcome, Ben, again to Smith.
How are you, James? How are you doing?
I'm very well. We've had to make some last minute changes because of the train strike. So I'm actually in a hidden location today rather than our usual studio. So we've managed to make do with the turbulence at the moment with travel.
I'm pretty sure last time we met, we made a commitment that this would be in person when we did it again. And the world's gone once more. Suddenly we're in a world of acceptance of hybrid work as opposed to shying away from it. So interesting of the times.
Maybe in 2023. Maybe.
Well, thank you very much for having me back, and thank you everyone for kind of taking the time to tune in. Really good to see you.
Yeah, and as always, the reason why we love having you back is because you are someone that really has their finger on the pulse with particularly with obviously of LinkedIn, but understanding the FinServ community. And I had a really, really great a few hours, digesting and getting to understand some of the insights from the FinServ report, which your team did. And it's really, really interesting. So I thought today we could obviously, or you could kind of describe some of the findings you got from that report. And I want to kind of just have a chat with you. And obviously people can chat in the comments. So we're live on LinkedIn. So if people have any questions to Ben, we can ask those questions live on the LinkedIn. I wanted to start off then, you've spoken for a few years now at the event, and you've always given a really good kind of near gaze into the future as to what people can expect if you're in a financial services company, you're in a bank, or you're an insurer, or you're in this huge ecosystem. Where are LinkedIn now, and where do you see things going in the future, both from a LinkedIn platform perspective and at a wider perspective in terms of FinServ?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. We could probably fill the time entirely with it. But let me kind of try and paint a picture of sort of financial services marketing on LinkedIn at the moment. I think it shouldn't really come as any huge surprise to the people tuning in that we are seeing continuing to see phenomenal growth in terms of businesses really doubling down on their activity on the platform, both from an organic perspective, but also from a paid point of view. I know you love some data points, so I've pulled out a couple of numbers which I'll just sort of rattle through. We have seen a 49% increase in engagements on topics such as finance, investing, retirement, those kind of topics year on year. So a 50% boost broadly. There's a 48% boost in paid advertising from financial services clients on the platform. 300,000 companies now within the financial services world are posting on our platform, and 167 million members were reached by posts around the kind of FinServ area. So I think this time last year I was talking about how we couldn't put the genie back in the bottle, that this rapid digitization that we saw that was kind of imposed on us by the pandemic, that we would never see a kind of total return to pre-pandemic ways. And I think, we're not, I can see from your backdrop and you can tell from mine, neither of us are actually in Cannes right now, but certainly the big conversation that's happening in Cannes is around, around digitization, around the role of creativity particularly. I think there's a huge amount within the digital advertising space, a huge amount of focus, quite rightly, on measurement and attribution and some of the kind of, more sort of rational elements of advertising. And my big worry and one of the big trends I want to talk about is that creativity is kind of left behind. And I think we've got to remember we're in the world of media and marketing, and the lifeblood of media and marketing is creativity. And what I'd hate to see, whilst it's really, really important that the rational side is kind of well covered and well explored, I'd hate to see the emotional side of our roles kind of ignored. And I think we probably are in danger of being at a little bit of a tipping point that we kind of need to level out at the moment. And I'll be interested if you've seen that across the client. I know you work extensively, with financial services clients. I'll be interested if you've seen that trend as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, Ben. I think, you said back in 2020 that this kind of pandemic, we kind of have the situation where there's this kind of hope that there's return to normal idea. And I've always said that there's no such thing as normal. Work is always changing. Things are always changing. There's never going to be a return to normal, because now we have this huge virtual ecosystem in which we can do, particularly, obviously not for everyone, but for a lot of people in finance, a lot of our work can be done online. It can be done remotely. And, just as a case in point today, 10 years ago, a nationwide train strike would have crippled us as a business. It would have rendered so much of our operations redundant. But now, with a flick of a switch, operations are continuing, if not continuing better, whilst people are remote. And I've been banging the drum about remote work, and I think it's amazing. But I do absolutely agree with you that there are downsides in that there is I think a creativity hole, which I think people need to talk about. And this is not saying that you need everyone back in the office 5 days a week. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But fostering creativity and actually understanding at the heart of good communications is authenticity. And we're seeing that. And I think you identified that in the report, that authentic communications is so important. And we've seen that the analogy we like to use is that we've seen almost a decentralization of content production away from a centralized authority towards more of entrusting people to make better content. And I think that really resonated in the report, because one of the big takeaways was authenticity is so important, more so than ever. And I think that's been consistent. And it's really interesting to see that LinkedIn as a platform is really, really equipping users to, I suppose, tap into their own worlds of creativity. You have creator profiles. I've seen so many creator managers now, which I think are really great for the platform. And I suppose it'd be interesting to get your perspective on, you mentioned that there is that kind of creativity negligence in many ways. People are focusing on the data, the hard maths. How do you bridge that? And do you view the role of people-powered content as a way to answer that creativity void, which may be developing as a result of this new way of working?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a classic you question, because there's about 25 different takes on that, which I'll try and kind of deconstruct it a little bit. I mean, the first thing as well is in a national poll, there's 39% support for the rail strike. So there's 39%. So again, we cannot ignore the prevailing economic conditions that we're operating within, and that will have an impact over time on how the voice, how financial services turns up. And again, one of the big things that came out of the pandemic is that, unlike previous crises, or financial crises certainly, FinServ brands have been very much part of the solution rather than the problem. And I think, again, as we talk about that desire for authentic voice and that desire for kind of purpose and transparency with a business, set against the context of probably the largest intergenerational wealth transfer that we will ever see, as kind of the wealth transfers from baby boomers down into the sort of ZXYs. That need for brands to speak authentically and create community and create connections with their customers has never been more vital. And you talk about, without banging the LinkedIn drum too much, you talk about all the opportunities that you have on our platform. So from a senior leader posting through to a member of a team giving an insight into what it's like to work within that environment, through to the the comms that are coming out organically, and then absolutely underpinned by the paid activity. And one of the big takeaways that I'd love marketeers on this at this conference to take away as well is this notion of the level of investment, but B, thoughtfulness that needs to go into each one of those areas. So if you think about it, the average production investment and frequency of a television commercial far outweighs that of a typical piece of digital marketing. And yet you're reaching, you have the capability to reach, vast numbers. If you take LinkedIn, when we're well in excess of 800 million members, 30 million of whom are in the UK. So when you cut that down against demographics, that's meaning just about everyone who is a professional has a LinkedIn profile. ITV would dream of having 30 million people that they could access, with a piece of comms, before you even get into the multi-channel world. And yet, investment in creativity and perceptions about frequency haven't translated yet into the digital advertising space. And I think those are the big lessons we should learn moving forward, as we recognize that digital advertising is crucial and here to stay, and is capable of providing the levels of reach that traditional broadcast media used to dream of.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think you should bang the drum about LinkedIn, because I generally think LinkedIn is actually, for us, it's just for what we do. And I suppose we do so much work in finance, is absolutely the best platform. Personally, yeah. I think for what contacting like high net worth users, I think the general energy of LinkedIn is so positive, Yeah.
And I mean, again, I'm gonna flick over some more stats as well, because it does paint the picture. There is no other professional network that comes close to LinkedIn. We do know that the context that you receive and you engage with content is really, really crucial. And so this content that financial services marketeers are putting out there sits within the context of professional information. So you're not suddenly having to shift your mindset from whatever's happening on Love Island through to suddenly talking about investment decisions, which sort of jars. Instead you've got senior leaders posting their perspective, and then you've put a marketing message in around investment. And I mean that flows, that context is really, really key. So just taking one audience, which I pulled some numbers on, just to kind of have a look at. If you think about so institutional investors, for example, not a massively sort of easy to target audience anywhere else, but through our first party data, job title, company worked out, we can identify who those people are, and we can say, because we can look at their activity, that they are 40% more likely than normal LinkedIn members to network with other individuals. They are 38% more likely to receive shareable content from companies. So they are, in other words, incredibly actively engaged members of LinkedIn. And that's precisely the audience that most of the clients I work with want to engage with, which is why you see those growth numbers coming.
And I think the numbers are really impressive, and I think we're still grappling our heads around, because if you go back, I think the perfect point is, TV advertising. You'd have an advertisement on TV. You kind of be like, I hope that a demographic who's kind of my audience are watching this show at this time. And you just kind of go, let's just see what happens. Now with LinkedIn, you have this ability to micro target, and I think what's really good, the good side of this is that you can now be very, very, very demanding as a marketeer as to who you want to target, like who you want to specify. And we always say to people that really the reality of any brand is that it's a culmination of lots of micro communities. There's not one persona which your company is going to target. It's probably a poor bit of research if that's the outcome. The reality is personas are varied and very different. And as we get into this era of decentralized content, the requirements for brands to become much more specific about the content they're creating is getting greater. And I think this puts a tremendous amount of stress on marketing teams, because you have a marketing team and they are getting requests for content which are far beyond the capacity of, quite honestly, most teams, because you have so many different audiences. And this idea of, I suppose, having a system where you can rapidly create content through utilizing, again, a core piece, utilizing your people as well, on top of the traditional kind of top-down paid advertisement, I think creates a really great cadence, because you can kind of activate leaders in your business to create these micro communities. So that's kind of our perspective. But I'm keen to hear, how do you advise your clients to, you've mentioned, obviously, there's creativity gap and there's this massive demand for content, and LinkedIn has all these users and it's changing, but what's the practical steps to actually answering these very nuanced content needs, which have come through improved targeting through the platforms?
So an analogy I would use is, I'd look to modern Hollywood. So let's look at Disney and how Disney kind of treats its content, if you like, and kind of strip away whether you're a Star Wars fan or any of those kind of details, but look at what happens when you have a blockbuster piece of content that then is sliced and diced into a TV show, which is into a special, which is into parts 1, 2, and 3, and throughout a community is built. And I think although it is a lofty ambition, I think for financial services marketeers to have in the background, what is my Star Wars idea, and what does the Mandalorian look like that comes off the side of it, and how much can I make out of Baby Yoda merchandise? It's phenomenal when you look at that when you apply the kind of Disney thinking to a content marketing strategy, and see how you can kind of ladder that down, and all of the different sidebars related to specific different audiences within that universe. But it's all driving a community. It's all driving a relationship, and I think that's a headline analogy that I would definitely have in the back of my mind if I was a content marketer.
The answer I'd say to you is that most marketing brands don't have a Star Wars budget, which is obviously I think it's always a struggle to how do you activate, and it is daunting, because, like, for example, if you got LinkedIn, you can see, wow, I've got 2 million people, right? And you go on to the paid advertising module. It's incredibly complex for a reason, because LinkedIn is always bringing new ways to actually kind of bring stories to people. And you break down these advertising campaigns, and you realize quite quickly, as you correctly said, that in many ways you're producing a whole community, and there's a whole narrative, there's a whole story, and it's an ongoing story, and it's constant. I think this is going back to what you said around, do you think there has to be a redefining as to what it means to be in marketing? And I think actually senior management who aren't in marketing, I think, don't really understand the pressure that many social media managers and marketing teams face, because they are being given a task which is incredibly daunting for people who don't understand the depth that you need to grow. And do you think that there needs to be better education, I suppose, for non-specialists? Because I see teams with social media manager or a marketing team, 3 people, and they're tasked with LinkedIn as a channel. I think that's almost an impossible task.
I think there's a really simple step, and I've definitely seen this really help out social teams, both in-house and also in agencies. Get your senior leaders on the platform. I think there's a direct correlation between those financial services brands where the chief executive is active on LinkedIn, directly correlates to sensible investment in both team and budgets. Because once senior leaders recognize and realize through their own engagement the power of the platform, then it is far easier, and then that trickles down to the to their direct reports and to the leadership team as a whole, and then that trickles down again to the organization as a whole. When you see, take HSBC for example, Noel Quinn, fantastically active participant on the platform, and I'd suggest anyone in FinServe marketing to follow him, or Venkat at Barclays, again fantastically active on the platform. But what you see structurally and organizationally within Barclays and HSBC is you see that coming down through the organization and to marketing and communications, where they have from the top endorsement of LinkedIn as a platform. So again, an action for anyone on the call would be, if you haven't already engaged with your senior leadership, do it now, because it'll make your jobs easier when they understand a bit more about this platform that is not going away. It's only growing. 2 new members a second. We are only seeing growth in this area.
What's the secret to doing that? Do you have a advice for people who are maybe on the call who have senior management who, I know you've answered this before, but it's always I know you might say get with the times, but commonly there is this, because people, I think maybe they don't understand the platform, and there is still that resentment or kind of the idea that this is not this is just LinkedIn, I'll just post and go. Because you do this all the time, how do you break, HBC clearly is an example of that. Yeah. What's the blueprint?
Well, I think peer group behavior is really, really important. And one of the key facets of LinkedIn is that you can, take a look at other people's profiles. So, if I was a, digital marketeer in a financial services brand, one of the first things I'd be doing is looking up the chief execs profiles of my top 10 peers and finding out what they're up to. And I would guess that probably 6 or 7 out of that 10 will be quite active. And it is, I've said this before and I know, but it is a bit of a question of, get on board or be left behind. There is a little bit of a call to arms here. And then the second thing is I would look at some third-party data like the Edelman report on thought leadership. And Edelman has also done a fascinating piece of work on the impact of senior leadership on their organization through their social media activity. Have a look at those data points and let that make the argument for you. I really do think, I'm not, obviously, I sit in this role and I'm going to say, oh, LinkedIn is the be all and end all. Of course I am. But it's not just me. The industry and numerous third-party research data points back up. And we know it ourselves. We just started the conversation talking about authenticity, connection, community. Well, how do you do that? Well, you do that by having an authentic voice, having consistent messaging, being true to your values. I read an amazing stat the other day that something like 86% of financial services brands have some kind of a vision statement. And yet, equally, something close to 80% do not connect their vision statement to their marketing. So why is that happening? Where is that disconnect? And how can you bring your authentic voice unless you bring your vision, values, and truth to your external facing comms as well?
I suppose what I've kind of noticed is that this kind of new way of being present on LinkedIn as a leader in finance is so different to the world in which, for decades, there was this kind of it was starting before the pandemic. There was a pre-pandemic order, or a kind of, I don't know when the era was, but there was this world where you had this kind of, and I think one of the best people who articulates this really well is Damien Horner from Real Vision, when he basically says that there was this world, and it was a very comfortable world where you had your big buildings, Canary Wharf, you had the New York skyscrapers, you had your PR press statement.
You were over here,
you worked in the background, and you just had this environment where LinkedIn now is kind of like breaking, and I suppose not just LinkedIn, but this new way of digital communication is kind of creating a much more flatter kind of organizational I suppose, chart as to how you communicate, because a CEO can write on LinkedIn, and then someone in the company can like and comment on that CEO's post, and likewise a CEO can literally like a grad who's just started their work and they've posted. So do you feel like there is this kind of massive shift in the whole zeitgeist of financial services as an industry? And do you feel like we're in the eye of the storm, and in 5 or 10 years this is going to be so normal? Or do you think there's always going to be this kind of resentment to kind of, I suppose, completely flip what it means to be a finance brand on modern media?
Yeah. I mean, unsurprisingly, no, I don't think it's going to flip. I think 10 years ago it would have been inconceivable for or extremely unusual for a FTSE chief exec to comment on a social movement, for example, Black Lives Matter. You wouldn't have heard the chief exec of a FTSE company, offering her opinion on that or his opinion on that. And now it's inconceivable for them not to. Now it's inconceivable for a major incident in world events not to have a perspective given. And this is connected to authenticity. This is connected to a generational shift. It's connected to a societorial shift as well, where this sort of old world order is no longer respected to the same extent as it used to be. We are, you can look at work trends. You can look at the phenomenal growth in freelance and small business owners, where this notion of self-actualization and personal brand has grown exponentially as well. So they're all connected, and it is a wave, a societal wave that's sweeping over every facet, not simply our little bit of FinServe, but we're certainly kind of caught up in it. And I think you mentioned you mentioned the kind of influencer report, and incidentally, a little bit of a plug. We've got a breakfast on Tuesday next week where we're launching the report. So you'll find the details on my profile. Sign up. It's in person. It'll be great. But one of the big things is around Gen Z and this desire to co-create, this desire not just simply to receive, but actually to have your fingerprints on the co-creation and the delivery of services that you're getting, and that requires authenticity. It requires humanity and empathy, and all of these sort of things that we're talking about, are crucial to that notion of co-creation and broadening your appeal, from Gen Z, upwards.
So on the topic of the future, where do you, again, I know obviously you're seeing them now and you're helping your clients now with, enterprise clients with navigating this change. Where do you see the future in terms of, as a platform, what can you share about what's coming? For me, candidly, I've seen over the last year a massive, LinkedIn isn't perfect. I say one of the really bad things about LinkedIn, which they've sorted, is they had no real support for creators. There was no creator program. Every other platform had understood the value of creators in actually growing programs. They're a crucial part of, YouTube creators, TikTok, massive enablers of creators. LinkedIn are starting to do this now, and I think it's long overdue. And the creator mode now on LinkedIn is another way. It's kind of really helping people become comfortable and kind of lose the shackles a little bit on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a bit like this room at the moment. There's an image of LinkedIn as a bit kind of stuff, you just got to be very proper, just nice, perfect post, and just get on with your day. That is 100% now LinkedIn from the top down. We can see that shift change to authenticity. Could you expand slightly on, I suppose, that as a change, and if there are any other kind of changes which people on this call can look forward to in terms of from LinkedIn, and also just your perspective as well?
Yeah, I mean, so we're a very responsive organization, and we recognize that people want to hear from creators, and that kind of content is really, really valued. And so yes, we've responded, and we have invested heavily in our creator program, and it's brilliant to hear that you're seeing the impact of that over the last 12 months on the platform. And I think you can expect more. I think there's going to be more of that coming. And I think, for us, as a business, we want, we are a members first organization. So just about every decision we take is in relation to giving our members a better and more fulfilling experience on the platform. And so, innovations like live, as we are now, but also our events piece is coming. And then equally in the back office, the sort of campaign manager and how interacting with us on the paid side is made easier is another big thing. But what we're not going to be, absolutely the first to market with some staggering but risky format. We are proud of our professionalism. We're proud of the fact that we verify profiles that you're connected. It is you. There isn't some anonymity that means you can throw grenades into conversations. You are, I talk about it as there's difference between, conversation in the pub and a conversation in the kitchen at work. It is respectful. It is an environment where, like I say, you are your true self, not furry kitten 1992. That doesn't happen. There is you are Ben Kingsmill on the platform, and you are connected to your colleagues and connected probably to your bosses from all through your career. So you're not going to turn up and be disrespectful. You're going to be thoughtful, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing that there is doesn't mean you can't be authentic. It absolutely doesn't mean that. It means if anything, you're required to be more authentic because it is you, not Furry Kitten 1992.
And I agree with you. I think anonymity, that's one of the great things about LinkedIn. I think it's such a nice platform because people in general, the atmosphere is so supported towards professional development. No platform was perfect. I think there's definitely some of the algorithmic, I think, choices recently aren't perfect. But what platform is? It's impossible. 800 million people to have everyone answering and being happy. But I think if you go on any other platform and compare it to LinkedIn, it's just, for me, it's just night and day. And I think for our clients, that's why we're such big evangelists of LinkedIn. And it's really nice, to see. I think what's also really cool is, you being on this call, doing a live and being visible is so great because, not every single platform, I think, empowers their staff, their people to actually be there. And it's really refreshing to see and to get you candidly speaking, not only on LinkedIn, but on LinkedIn Live, on an experimental format as well. So we've done it and it's really good. So just keen to see kind of like, is this something which with LinkedIn, like in terms of, I suppose supporting your clients, how is that going to evolve? Is there like more initiatives? Is it going to be much more? Are we going to be seeing more from LinkedIn's people? Like what's kind of like the thought process behind LinkedIn's, I suppose, stakeholder engagement for the future?
I think it's a great question, and I there are a number of things that I can talk about and a number of things I can't talk about. And again, we have one of our company values is act like an owner, and we are very much empowered to act like an owner and consider this business our business, and we should be, because take me, I work exclusively with financial services brands. I have oversight of within my remit across sort of EMEA and LATAM, so I can bring that perspective to conversations like this. But I'm also from a team of incredibly talented individuals who do the same with their clients. At the moment, we have, as you've identified, we kind of split out into sort of enterprise and non-enterprise, and that's something that I don't get anywhere near. Unsurprisingly, there's a commercial element to it. Our higher spending clients have access to more of our team. It is a We're operating in a commercial world. But there is a huge amount of effort that goes into, as I said, we're a responsive business. We listen, we help, we have a phenomenal amount of support, as I said, both organically and on the paid side. And one of the big questions we always ask ourselves is, how can this be done at scale? When I talk about the huge numbers of the 50% increase in investment on financial services paid advertising, well, that scale is hard to kind of, we have to build our teams up in order to be able to kind of support and service that demand as well. And we're working incredibly hard to make sure that is a consistent experience across all of the clients that work with us.
And just had some comments around, I think, younger investments, particularly looking towards younger generations in terms of having those conversations with FinServ. You mentioned also there's been this kind of push to, I suppose, tying things up in terms of, you use a metaphor about people becoming more like viewing themselves more as TV productions or creative studios. Do you imagine, or is LinkedIn, and are you kind of encouraging, is live and events, online events, communication, is this kind of it feels like that's where LinkedIn is pushing its users to kind of really start having things like we're doing today, community events, bringing speakers on, peer-to-peer content, using live, using events, using groups, bringing people in to say, here, hi, I'm speaking at this event. Yeah. Is that kind of the future which LinkedIn are, I suppose, coercing us into using more through the updates they brought in?
I would flip that completely.
Okay.
I think we are a responsive business that's led by our members. We're members first. Yeah. And what we're seeing is increasing demand. You're absolutely right about the behavior. We're seeing increasing demand from our members to have meaningful conversations. There's a value exchange that you expect on LinkedIn. You come to LinkedIn to improve your professional self. And that value exchange, I think, is crucial to the success of the platform, that when you come on, you will leave the time you spent having learned something, or having developed something, or maybe having networked a little bit. And that is going to be, that's the heartbeat of our platform, is that, that value exchange with the member that drives their professional life forward. And if that comes from live, if that comes from engaging with long form content, we're seeing a big growth in sort of white papers and those sorts of things being downloaded. Video views are way longer than on a lot of other kind of video streaming platforms. So it's it's a cliche, but the content is king. If you build it, they will come. If the content is good and engaging, however it's delivered, you will get our members to engage with it.
And just had another question about, I suppose, positioning your professional brand and your personal brand on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, you're creating content, how do you view that split? Because, it is a balancing act. And my analogy is, I like to say to people, look, imagine you're networking drinks at a conference and you're an event. That's the kind of vibe you want to have on LinkedIn. You don't want to become a robot where you're just sharing mindless content. But you want to inject a sense of humanity. How do you do that?
Oh, I was about to say, not everyone can be, Guinness World Record kettlebell. Just to throw that out there.
Why not?
But if I take your profile and your presence on the platform, I think it's a really good example, because I know that you're a massive LinkedIn advocate, hugely well informed about social media marketing. But I also know, bizarrely, that you're the best in the country at lifting up a kettlebell. And that, puts a bit of light and shade into, you as a professional. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that. I was on a call with the head of social media and governance, and I hope he won't mind me saying this, but HSBC yesterday. And it turns out that he's a huge Bros fan. He was from this 80s band. And, that's, it's kind of like the first 5 minutes of a meeting, isn't it? When you're all sitting down and oh, what did you do on the weekend? We don't turn from one person into another just because you're at work. Yes, the majority of what we're talking about is going to be related to work, but we still have personalities. You still got to have a little bit to kind of bring some personality to it. And so, as I say, I think you're a perfect example of the way you post. It's on your descriptor, well, Guinness World Record holder, but also there's the reason, most of the conversations are going to take place on, which is your professional content.
I suppose also there's the other thing is the kind of, using the example of me, I'm obviously quite vocal on certain things around like remote work, and sometimes I go and say, look, this company, what are you doing? This is obviously, so there is obviously, I suppose, on the flip side, for most people, would you advise that there is I suppose it's common sense, isn't it, really? It's like, maybe avoid politics, maybe avoid really contentious issues, but just be smart, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I am passionate about diversity, inclusiveness, and belonging, and that can sometimes, you can sometimes steer into something that's a bit, tricky water. Yeah. But my passion is not going to mean that I'm going to be polite if I'm going to call out, if I see anything that goes against, my passionately held beliefs around diversity, inclusiveness, and belonging. That's, yes, we should be polite, but we should also be true to our values. And you turn up with your authentic self. Don't be rude. Don't be unpleasant. Don't be nasty. But equally, don't hide your values.
I think that's a brilliant way to wrap up. I think authenticity shines. And Ben, always a pleasure speaking to you, not only as obviously position on LinkedIn, but as a former successful agency owner. It's always nice to see and get your insights. And really great for you to spend some of your busy day chatting to us. And look forward to catching up with you soon.
Happy days. Look forward to it. Cheers, James.
Thank you, Ben. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Cool. Well, thank you, Ben. And I hope you enjoyed that. And again, you can connect with Ben on LinkedIn. He is very visible. He is the guy to go to for anything around understanding, FinServe, if you're an enterprise business and looking to kind of up your game when it comes to LinkedIn. He's the man to go to.